discussion to lift up the quality of life of the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica. We have been having this as an argument to win. None of us will win if we continue fighting like this. What we will do is we'll make the country lose. And all of us have opinions. And all of us have strong opinions. But when we come to look at the matters of nation building, we must now look beyond our personal views and look at what is best for the people of the lovely Commonwealth. The association believes, ladies and gentlemen, that while this country is ours to build, and we have assistance from sometimes people overseas, and some of them make barrels even if they go to the thrift shop to send it to us. They send something to their family. Really and truly, the people who are here, who are governed here, whether it's good governance or bad governance, these are the people who must have a right to elect who governs them. Those who will get Panadol at Dominica China Friendship. Those who drive on our roads and do whatever else. Those who are penalized for driving on the wrong side of the road, etc., etc. In doing so, and in observing that, the whole question of residency must form the basis of our conversation. And if we don't talk about residency for voting, then we can kiss this thing goodbye. Why? Because the statistics we have tells us, and I understand what you said, Madam Chairman, a Dominican is a Dominican is a Dominican. I happen not to believe that. Because an American who's a naturalized American is not an American, an American, an American. And we can go on and use other nations. So, I can take the night when I'm a preacher, but I don't intend to take the night. Okay? And I'd prefer if you don't interrupt me when I'm presenting. I don't like the manners. Madam Chair, as economic citizen who has residence in Dominica, in our view, should vote. If that economic citizen lives within the sphere of this white Kubuli, but if they have never visited Dominica, they must not have the right, the same right that residents of Dominica have. And that's why we say residency must form the basis of this, because this is about governance. It's about governance. And if we look at this from that perspective, the number of CBI citizens we have already been told that we have, and the population of the lovely Commonwealth of Dominica and those who have voting rights here would probably almost be equal. Just think about it. Just think about it for a moment. So that's what we believe as far as the registration of electors are concerned. We observe, for example, the difference in the definitions in terms of the residency and the absence when it comes to voting, and that we will detail in the document that we're going to send you. The question of national voters ID card, we believe that we should, like Antigua, like some of our sister islands, get into a national voters ID card. Why? I hear people make comments about all of us know each other. I have a feeling that most of us speak that, in the air. I'm from Kulibistri. I vote in Kulibistri. I live in Emsall. I go to Kulibistri to vote and stood in the line last elections. And I recognized probably about 5 out of 25 people. I go to Kulibistri every weekend. Right? Somebody from the polling station, I asked them, who was this person? And all they said to me is, they said they are so-and-so. There's a friend of mine who I met in the voting line who I hadn't seen for 12 years. Never been back to Dominica for 12 years. And I spent time connecting with him, and he was there to vote. You have wisdom. Just think about it. In Antigua, there's a voter's card with a voter identification number on it, with an expiration date, and all of that. Okay? Check it out. I'm sure you can see that. That makes sense from the perspective of eligibility, the fact that you are there, and the fact that we know who you are. I don't necessarily believe that we have to go into fingerprinting. Fingerprinting might be one of the ways to say who you are. But I believe that we have to establish some form of identification as to who is who when we go into that polling station. All right? I believe that is absolutely necessary. There are things that are outside of Mr. Byron's report, and I just mentioned them. We wrote a letter to the government sometime in July of last year, signed by 25 of our pastors, requesting the government look into what we call the discriminating vice in the Constitution and in the House of Assembly Elections Act that actually puts minister of religion in the same bracket as a prisoner. So a prisoner is not allowed to contest elections, and a minister of religion is not allowed to contest elections. I heard Mr. John Jules just said a while ago he's a preacher and he's been contesting elections. I think the AG must advise him as to as to where that is, right? He publicly told you that he is a preacher, but he's contesting elections and all of that. So probably the Attorney General may wish to advise him in that regard. I know him as a preacher. He comes from a church that I came from. But when you begin to speak like that, I was told I couldn't contest elections in my village council a few years ago for that very reason. But, that happens. The question of campaign finance reform is something that concerns us. And it concerns us because we are really concerned that we are spending money in an environment where our minimum wage is below, for some people, living standards. And you provide them with a token every 5 years because you have the money, and then they go and they suffer for the rest of the period. Quite frankly, that's my personal view now, not that of the Evangelical Association. I believe, quite frankly, that there must be some relation to the cost of living and the living standards of the people and whatever sum that we decide to have for campaign financing. And that's something that we would recommend. I'm winding this down. We all agree. Whatever party we come from, I believe we all agree that we need some urgent change in this process. We must seek to work to ensure that every individual has a right to express his or her political opinions without interference. We must work to seek and receive and impart information so that our people can make informed choices. Somebody spoke about the whole question of debates. But more than debates, when we get down to it, we need to find ways of conveying information to people that is factual, that is true. We know politicians sometimes exaggerate stuff to make them look better. But during the period, I think we need to give people facts on what they should be doing. We must seek to ensure that our campaign is on an equal basis with political parties, and we talk about the use of the media. Let me just say here and now that I do not agree that private media must be legislated. Otherwise, I would probably be jailed because I serve voluntarily to manage a religious radio station. I don't get paid for it. And on that radio station, we do no political ads and no political programs of no party whatsoever. And under that proposal, one person who's not being paid would go to jail, and that would be me. So I don't subscribe to that at all. We are mindful of the provisions of the law against treating bribery, personification, and undue influence. And we pay particular attention that the definition of undue influence includes inflicting spiritual injury. Yeah. We read the books, you know. Unlike what one of my friends said, yeah, we read the books. So the definition in the law includes inflicting spiritual injury in order to compel a person to vote or refrain from voting. We are in the business of spiritual teaching. And that is within the law. So that says that we have to be careful with what we say. And sometimes we ask, what is that? A lot of things must be made enforceable. Our problem in Dominica is we have plenty laws and plenty so on, so we're not enforcing them. And I'm looking at the chairman of the Electoral Commission. A lot of the dead people names that should be there, we shouldn't be here talking about that. That should have been done a long time. Right? We're not enforcing stuff. And our problem sometimes is not the law. Our problem is that we are just not enforcing the law. My friends, laws govern every civilized country. When the law is watered down or ignored, chaos is inevitable. The church encourages all to enact just laws and to follow the law of the land to ensure continued stability and peace. The DAEC encourages all parties to approach this important subject matter with soberness of mind, not with, some of the rancor that we have heard. Chill out. You have 12 bit of water on the table. Drink it before you speak. Chill out. Observe it with soberness of mind and purity of heart to ensure that all our decisions are well informed. We encourage the media, especially those on the social platforms, to be responsible in their discourse and civil to each other on the matter of electoral reform, especially on this matter of electoral reform. Ladies and gentlemen, in short, we have to stop fighting. We have to stop warring. We have to stop this. This is making us real, I can't use that word there, but it doesn't make us look good. We have to stop fighting on issues that we shouldn't fight about. Let's, for one time, let's use this occasion for once to have civil conversation about something that will affect all of us. Because we believe the Dominican Labour Party is in office now. By every law in the book, they will not always remain in office. By every law, whether it's in the scripture or in history, they will not always remain in office. Some people believe that they will always remain in office. If you want to think that, keep thinking it. Which means that when the shoe goes on the other foot, then it will be something else. Let's do this so we all feel that we have worked justly towards the good of the lovely Commonwealth of Dominica. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Pastor Rodney. And just to say, in relation to the question of economic citizens and citizenship generally, there is no distinction in law in relation to different categories of citizenship. And there is no provision in the law as it stands now, nor in the proposed legislation, that would allow any citizen of Dominica, whether they are economic citizens or otherwise, to be either registered outside of Dominica or to qualify to be registered in Dominica unless they have been residing in a particular constituency for at least 3 months. That is the law as it is. That is not proposed to be changed in the law in the draft bill that has been presented by Sir Dennis. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, I would like to call on former Prime Minister Edison James to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Later said he does not like the idea of protocol having been established, but I will stick to that for the time being, protocol having been established. I will just go straight into my presentation. My name is Edison James. I'm from the community of Marigot. I've been out of the state for the last 4 months, came in this afternoon and recognized that the community of Marigot is not listed among the communities that will be part of the discussion, the community of Marigot. So I thought it would be desirable for me to take the opportunity to make some comments here. I want to, as a start, recognize the observers, because we have been having the discussion about electoral reform for a long time. It may be that one or two of you, regional, might have been aware of some of the things we've been saying. Let me recognize the Prime Minister, by the way. That's great. And thank you for being in Marigot in my absence. You know. Well received. I made arrangements. I made sure that happened. Yes, the observers, I'm not aware that it has been explained to us what your role and function is in this exercise. I had thought, when I heard the Prime Minister say that he was going to ask the OAS and the CARICOM and the OAS and the Commonwealth to be part of this exercise, I thought that what was going to happen is that the observers were going to be here and they were going to be the ones that we, the people, would be speaking to, so that they could hear what we are saying and would be charged with the responsibility to go back and prepare something and to give guidance to the powers that be. And as I listened from abroad on Monday and Tuesday last week, I noticed that one or two of the speakers were directing some aspects of the presentation to the observers, and were even asking that some documents be passed to the observers. So I'm concluding that the observers have a very important role to play, and I welcome that. I welcome that, because we've been talking among ourselves for a while now. And the thrust of the discussion, which we've been having now for probably about 15 years, the signpost, one of the significant signposts of the beginning of this discussion was 2008, when there is an email which every school child knows about. You can probably recite it word for word. Partner, over that, I don't know it word for word, but partner, don't drift too far. Tried calling you, but did not get through. I leave tomorrow. There's madness going on at the Electoral Commission. You need to call in Richie Charles and Kondwani. These guys are talking about electoral reform to do with ID cards and complete re-registration. Should that happen, it will damage your legacy, your re-election legacy, and so on. The reason, the madness that we'd heard about wasn't to do with, if this madness continues, we will disenfranchise Dominicans abroad, or we will not have free and fair elections. The madness wasn't about that. The madness was about the damage to the election legacy. Let's think about that. That is where a lot of this thing started. Because the Electoral Commission, the authority, which has the authority under the Constitution for registration and for the conduct of elections, had taken a decision, we are told, to embark upon these two important elements of electoral reform. They had done that. So the question is, why has it not happened? Why has it not happened? So, Pastor Rodney asked for us to do this thing with a clean heart. Perhaps he didn't use that expression. But it's a serious matter. that we exercise we are involved in here. So, what we want in the end, all of us, is free and fair elections. Generally, elections in Dominica have been free. There was a little aberration in 2019 when external military forces came into Salisbury and Marigot, and I met them in Marigot. I encountered and talked to them in Marigot. So that was a little aberration with respect to the freeness. But generally, elections are free in Dominica. But the fairness, that is always an issue. In fact, the Commonwealth Observer Mission on the 2014 election said, and I'm urging the observers, I see there's one here from the Commonwealth. If you have not yet read that report, read it. They said that the elections were free, but not necessarily fair. And they were not necessarily fair because of the bringing in of voters, transportation of voters, incumbency, and these sort of things. That's what's in the report by the consultants. Then we had this situation in the same 2014 elections, where a matter to the retreating reached as far up as the CCJ, and came back down, and the CCJ directed that the matter should be heard in the court. It wasn't held, it was null pros. Then we had the matter of the 2019 elections again, where the CCJ again was moved to comment, to observe in an obiter remark that the elections were tainted, and asked, advised, not directed, asked, advised, begged and beseeched that future elections be not held with these taints. Notwithstanding that, an election was held in 2022. The OAS observers again said that the rules, the same rules that the CCJ commented on, these rules should not be the basis of elections being held again. So that we are here now, hopefully, that there will be no other elections that will be held under these rules. Consultants have come. We've had the Mayor Motley consultancy. We've had the Port Welsh consultancy. We've had a tripartite consultancy involving the OAS and the Commonwealth and CARICOM, and they've all made recommendations. And then we have the Byron consultancy. None of these consultancies that I've mentioned, none of them was presented to the public and asked the public to discuss them and to dialogue on them and to make recommendations. The Byron report, within 2 days of it having been presented in its final form, it was presented to the public for discussion and debate. And that's good. That's good. Now, I've heard comments that the Prime Minister had no right to engage Mr. Byron. I do not agree with that. There's no constitutional bar, no legal bar against the executive, which has responsibility for legislation. There's no legal bar against the executive getting involved in seeking advice from whatever source. So I'm not subscribing to this suggestion. But I believe that there was sufficient information around on which the legislation could be based. And what could happen is that somebody like Sir Byron and the people he engaged eventually could be asked to prepare the legislation, to draft the legislation, prepare the legislation. But I think there are a number of things in the Byron report which we can embrace. We can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But my concern is that it seems, when I look at the first report of Sir Byron and the draft legislation, it seems to me, and it's probably more than seems to me, I'm aware that Sir Byron seemed to have been leaned on to adjust some of the thoughts and the convictions that he had before he might have been leaned on. Because, for instance, I know that the question of the ID cards And Sir Byron indicated that, and it's been mentioned here, that the large majority of the people whom he consulted indicated a need for ID cards for voting. In fact, the government and the commission engaged in purchasing equipment for the delivery of ID cards, including fingerprints. I think it's called the Sexlex, the Sexmex, Semlex. Thank you very much. Semlex equipment. You see me in a lie? I'm not lying, eh? Pardon? Yes. So the Semlex equipment was purchased for the purpose of getting ID cards in place, including fingerprints. And Sir Byron mentioned that. But something happened, and in the final report, Sir Byron moved away from the question of fingerprints, and some issues were raised. And the question of fingerprints, it seems to have something with some concern about criminality and people probably being worried about their fingerprints being in the database, and people would have an issue with that. I noticed the member for Granby, in talking about that the other day, referenced that he was the PAL rep for Granby and he was from St. Joseph. I don't know. When I meet, we'll talk about that. Okay? I don't know what that was about. Okay? So that matter, the finger, it's clear that the people want, and the commission and the government are interested in us having ID cards with fingerprints. This idea that we can use the passport and we can present the passport is flawed, because a passport has your name, it has your photograph, yes, but that doesn't mean you cannot go to a polling station, you present your passport, yes, that's you, your name is there, your photograph is there, the name there is Edison James, yes, so you're allowed to vote based on that. But you go to Bellevue Shoppe, and you'll probably find an Edison James there with the passport and the photograph, and you cannot deny. And I see the former Minister Darry shaking his head because he knows there's an Edison James in Bellevue Shoppe. The chairman said he doesn't look like me, so she knows him as well. Okay? So that would be an issue. That would be an issue. So we need the ID cards with the biometrics, fingerprints or facial recognition or what have you. So when you come to the polling station and you present your ID card, and we're talking election modernization, and I'm understanding that modernization would mean that we are able to vote with some electronic assistance, that you place your ID card on top of some machine, it reads it, and it will pick up your registration number, it would pick up your polling station, and all these other things. So there'd be no issue. So I believe strongly that is what we should be going with. The question of residency. There's been a lot of talk that we shouldn't disenfranchise. Remember I said earlier, the email did not say if the election reform happens that people will be disenfranchised or anything like that. It says about legacy. So the question of residency. Mr. Asia, I'd like you to help me here. It seems to me that, and we hear talk about people, our Dominican brothers and sisters overseas, and they send back barrels, and they make remittances, and these sort of things, okay? I agree with this notion that that is not the basis on which we should be determining whether somebody should be involved in voting or not voting, and so on. And then they send back barrels, they're so rich, they send back barrels, they make, give remittances, and so on. I heard an advocate of the Labour Party some time ago on radio said that in justifying assisting people in coming back to vote, paying their wages, he said, well, we help some of the poor people because they can't afford. And I said, well, if you can't afford to come back to vote, how you can argue that your right to vote is based on you sending remittances and you putting money in the bank and so on? I question that. But the person who said it, he said it with such Christian clarity that I said he's probably correct. He said it with a lot of Christian clarity. So Mr. AJ, I said I want you to help me. Because it seems to me not every Dominican is entitled to vote. A 17-year-old is not entitled to vote, but he or she is a Dominican. 16-year-old entitled to vote, but he or she is not a Dominican. Who prevented that? We, the people. We, the people. Because in our Constitution, it starts with, whereas the people of Dominica, and that Constitution goes on at section 13, which the AG referenced earlier, to say, section 13.2, I think 33.2, to say that, 33.2a, every Commonwealth citizen of age of 18 years or upwards who possesses such qualifications relating to residency or domicile. So it is not every Dominican. You have to be 18 years and you have to possess such qualifications relating to residency or domicile. And it did not leave it there to say that you can be resident or domicile anywhere in the world. It goes on to say, in Dominica. In Dominica. I'm not a lawyer, and that's why I say I'd lean on the AG. So, then what we did in the legislation which exists now, we segued from residency to absence. But absence is not residence. And I heard someone say that you can be resident in two places. It might be so. But this constitutional provision says you must be resident or domicile in Dominica. So the question is, are we not, by taking a position that we can segue from residency to absence or presence, are we not finding here some tension, as you lawyers would see, between this provision and the lawyers? I'm being told that's the law now. But we just heard that in Canada, what was the law for so long was found to be constitutionally wrong in its operation. So because it's the law now, doesn't mean that if a challenge is made, for instance, or if it is recognized that there's a problem here, that you will not be forced to change the provision in the law that you're making. So I'd ask the AG to help us here. The chairman keeps talking to me, keeps talking to me, okay? It's not the first time we've had this. The chairman talks to me when I'm talking, but that's all right. So I would like Mr. AG, I think I heard you, to address this for us. So I believe that we may be in breach of our Constitution by segueing from residency and domicile to absence from Dominica. And then with respect to the confirmation, I've heard we've been pulled up and said, look, no registration happens outside of Dominica. But there's proposal in the legislation, in the proposal from Sir Dennis, that we do the confirmation out of Dominica. There's provision, I think, for the Electoral Commission to establish 4 centers or something so out of Dominica, and for confirmation. There's no way that the Electoral Commission establishing 4 confirmation points can make it equitable for Dominicans who are dispersed around the world. So then I look at section 13 of the Constitution, section 13, Mr. AG, of the Constitution, which says, subject to the provisions of subsection 4, 5, and 7 of this section, no law shall make any provision that is discriminatory either of itself or in its effect. Would we therefore not effectively be saying that we are discriminating against the person who is in Guadeloupe if we do not have a center there? But we have centers in Antigua, and we have centers in New York and Canada, but we don't have centers in Barbados or something. So are we not going to be discriminating against the people in that regard? I believe all confirmation should be done in Dominica. All registration is done in Dominica. All voting is done in Dominica. So I would suggest that all confirmation be done in Dominica. media access, I believe that the private media should also be brought into the picture. Because we are talking about free and fair elections. It cannot be fair elections if the state-owned media, yes, all the political parties have access, but the private media denies access to one political party while the other political party or two have access. So I believe, and then I think again, that they would be discriminating, that private media would be discriminating against that particular political party on the basis of its political position, which is forbidden by the Constitution. The private media has to pay a license to operate, which means it's paying a license because it is deemed that it is using the property of the state. It has to pay a license. It is using our airwaves. That is why it's paying a license. So that property of the state is the property of all of us. So it should not be able to discriminate in that way. They would have to be paid, of course, whereas the state could decide that the state media must give the service free, but the private media, they would have to pay. But I believe the private media should be brought in the picture because we are practical people in Dominica here. In Dominica here, there are media houses in the private media houses which will not allow a political party to do anything on their station. So I'm saying they should be brought in, and there's a basis for it, there's a constitutional basis, there's a moral basis for it. And let me just say to Pastor Rodney, the situation you described, no, you wouldn't go to jail, because you are saying you don't allow any political party. The situation here, we're talking about discrimination, allowing one party and not allowing the other party. So it wouldn't affect you, Pastor Rodney, but he's left, so somebody will tell him I said that, okay? Campaign financing, and Madam Chair, whoever suggested that the comment made by the presenter, because I was listening from overseas, about the $50 per registered voter meant that voters were going to be asked to pay $50. That person misunderstood what was said. There's never any proposal, and you can go back and look at the transcript, or look at the recording. So that is not the issue at all, okay? I would just say, the observers, I come back to the observers as I end. I think it would be good, I'm sure the observers are going to have a sit-down discussion with the powers that be, that is the people who have the power to give effect to any legislation that is accepted. It is the executive, the cabinet, that will formulate and have the final say on the what the legislation will contain, and it is the legislature that is going to pass the law. In our country, Madam Observer, Mr. Observer, the executive and the legislature are more or less the same people. 19 elected, 5 senators, plus an AG, plus the speaker. Sorry, the speaker is not there. So it's the same people. So they're all listening to us. Most of them are listening to us here now, which is good, so they'll hear firsthand. But it's important for perhaps the opportunity to be taken by the observers to sit down with, quote unquote, the other side and have a comprehensive, through and through interaction before you leave and before you finalize your report. And that report, we expect, will be made available to the general public. I really am so happy to see you here, the observers, and all the others. I thank you for the opportunity. And I want to say that in Dominica today, I heard the gentleman from the local government say that he's the longest serving local government person. I think apart from Reginald Ostry, who was probably have 26 years in Parliament, the Prime Minister changed his position recently. I'm the next longest serving, or having served the longest, the living person having served the longest. The only thing different between Mr. Ostry and I is that I had the opportunity to be a leader of the opposing side in Parliament, and the ruling side, and then the opposing side again. So it's against that background and involvement that I sincerely hope that we can, at this point in time, come to the zenith, come to the final stage. What the zenith? Not the nadir, the zenith of our discussions, our involvement, and get this electoral reform thing in place. Because we cannot go to another elections without the reform, with the same thing. Because, let me just finally say this. We laud Sir Dennis Byron. And what do we use to give him the accolade? That he has been a president of the CCG. And we agree that that makes him an eminent person to do this work. So we are asked to hold on to his every word. But ladies and gentlemen, the current CCJ, not only the president, the current CCJ and president and 4 other justices sat down, having heard verbal submissions, oral submissions, having seen written submissions in a matter to do with the petitions. They have said the elections were tainted, and they've urged that we should not go into another election with those kind of tainted procedures and so on. If we can accept Sir Dennis Byron and hold on to his every word, we need to accept what the CCJ is telling us as well. And I just want to say one other thing I forgot. You see these things about the petitions? Because I heard a reference made about petitions. 2005 elections, we had petitions. 2009 elections, we had petitions. 2014 elections, we didn't have a petition, but we had a challenge in the court. 2019 elections, we had petitions. After all, you know, money that the party that is involved in that has to waste like that, there was something there. But these petitions, while the law says that a petition must be presented in the court within 21 days, after that, there's no limit in terms of time as to when a petition is going to reach its finality. The justices have said that the reason and the rationale for the constitutional bar on appeals to the appeal court and to the CCG is because it's important for people to know as soon as possible who their elected representatives are. I'm suggesting there should be an amendment to the legislation, and Sir Dennis has presented petition rules to allow that once a petition is launched, the entire process must be concluded within 90 days, rather than this long drawn-out situation where petitions go to the court and it takes 3 years before they are concluded. So I want to thank you for the opportunity you gave me to speak here tonight, and I want to wish all of us the very, very best. And I want to urge that we include Marigot among the communities that the consultation will be held at. We can't leave out a big community like Marigot in this whole exercise. So thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. James, for your contribution. I'm sure that there's a lot of what you said that will probably be responded to by others. But if I may, at this point in time, sorry, I think the AG wants to just speak to one point.
Yes, just on the issue of the residency and domicile. That obviously is if it had to be taken to its end conclusion, would be a drawn-out legal argument with both sides presenting their views. But just in short, just a definition of domicile. There may be others, but this is one here. The country that a person treats as their permanent home or lives in and has a substantial connection with. I think that's broad enough to encompass somebody who's not necessarily in the jurisdiction, maybe out of the jurisdiction, but they consider and treat Dominica as their home. So domicile could cover that. And that definition would also be appropriate to address the issue of absence as distinct from the ordinary residence that's been spoken about. The suggestion that the drafters were so inebriated or otherwise unaware of what they were doing that they included the term absence from Dominica when they've referred to residence elsewhere is highly unlikely, I suggest. But, you know, Mr. James, we can continue the debate some other place, some other time.
Thank.
What? Yeah, discrimination is in the Constitution, but discrimination is not because we say something is discrimination that means it's discrimination. The fact is that I may have to travel a longer distance than somebody else to get to a registration officer or even to get to the election office. That doesn't necessarily make it discrimination. But again, I say those are discussions that this is probably not the best forum for us to have those debates.
Thank you very much. And may I just indicate as well that on Thursday, August 24th, from 6 p.m., there will be consultations at Wesley for the communities of the Northeast, Calibishi to Marigot. That's on Thursday, August 24th. I would like to invite Monsignor John Wiss to deliver his comments and remarks, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers of Cabinet and Parliament, Honorable Attorney General, distinguished observers, and other invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chair, with your permission, I will give a preamble to. I am Monsignor William John Lewis, and I represent the Roman Catholic Diocese of Roseau and also the Dominica Christian Council. Madam Chair, I'd like, with your permission, to give a preamble to our presentation and then invite Father Nigel Karam to actually give the proposals that we have in mind. Thank you for the opportunity to be present and to participate in this process towards electoral reform with a view to strengthening our democratic structures and enacting and maintaining just laws. As the Church, we speak from the perspective and based on the principles of the Word of God and its interpretation by legitimate authority. That word which upholds the dignity of the human person, authentic human development, love and justice, and dialogue. The book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27, reminds us that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore possess an inherent dignity. This dignity is not dependent on race, creed, economic class, political power, sex, or personal abilities. Human dignity is the result of human existence. This dignity demands authentic growth and development, not based solely in economic terms, but embraces the social, cultural, political, and spiritual dimensions of human life. Moreover, the exercise of love and justice cannot be excluded from human and social development. They are crucial to the full development of each member of society and to the welfare of the whole society. Consequently, love of neighbor is an absolute demand of justice because charity is seen not only in personal relationships, but in structures and policies that respect human dignity, authentic growth, and that protect genuine rights. Respectful dialogue then becomes the primary means for maintaining human dignity, authentic human development, and the call to love and justice when addressing differences and conflicts and seeking consensus. It is with these principles in mind that we present our contribution to the matter at hand with the understanding that the goal of all these consultations is to ensure the constitutional rights of all the people of our nation to freely and fairly electing a government of their choice. And so, Madam Chairperson, with your permission, I invite Father Karam to give our presentation from the Church and from the Council.
I am Father Nigel Karam and a member of the Dominica Christian Council. 2 meetings were held by members of the Dominica Christian Council. The first on Monday, July 31st, 2023, and the second on Thursday, August 17th, 2023, in order to discuss and formulate this short presentation. At both meetings, members of the Dominica Methodist Circuit, the Roman Catholic Church, and the Anglican Communion were present, including the president of that body. The current president of the Dominica Christian Council, Reverend Mona Christmas Fraser, is unable to be here tonight as she prepares to leave our shores tomorrow for a new appointment. It was agreed at both meetings the following. The Council recommends the need for a more prominent role for the Electoral Commission in guiding this entire process of consultations. However, after having understood that the proceeds of the rounds of consultations will be delivered to the Electoral Commission and perhaps other members of civil society and church for their consideration and appropriate action, the Dominica Christian Council believes that this will redound to a more independent and transparent outcome. Furthermore, regarding the draft Electoral Commission Bill of 2023, the Dominica Christian Council supports and welcomes the revised composition and expansion of the Electoral Commission. The DCC further supports any revision of mechanisms that will allow the Electoral Commission to be fully and independently financed to ensure more efficient and autonomous functioning. As it pertains to the draft Registration of Electors Bill 2023, members of the Dominica Christian Council recognize the financial dilemma of whether to issue a multi-purpose national ID or a specific voter ID for purposes of elections. The members agree that the option for a specific voter ID card would be more beneficial and better ensure one person, one vote. Sir Dennis Byron himself indicated his 4 observations and/or reservations, page 25 of report number 1, even while maintaining a national ID in the legislation itself. He called for further consultation. We refer especially to his final remarks on the matter, which refer to the constitutional parameters of the Electoral Commission. Members further agreed and supported the mechanism suggested to facilitate confirmation of eligible electors on the register of electors for its cleansing. The Electoral Commission would then enable members of civil society and church to monitor this process more closely. The proposals for the expanded Electoral Commission would then be able to more closely monitor this process. The members of the Council support the retention of a 5-year term and the current parliamentary definition of, and I quote, absence from Dominica for a period exceeding 5 years was a basis for deleting an elector's name from that register. Report 1, page 28. This is in keeping with the constitutional position of our country, whereby the predominant constitutional criteria for voting is not citizenship, but domicile and residence within the Commonwealth of Dominica. By extension, any further clarification and refinement of the law should now be enacted to remove doubt and ensure the law is enforced. On the issue of campaign financing, the Council agrees that there should be monitoring and auditing of the finances used in political campaigns. Limits should be imposed on how much any one donor can give, and there should be no funding from foreign sources. There should be a declaration of sources of funds and campaign expenditure. Here concludes the recommendations from the Dominica Christian Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monsignor John Lewis and Father Nigel Karam. I would like to give the floor now to Faya Landa, who will be followed by Yannick Regis, Natalie Murphy, Hezron Charles, Maurice Cyril, and Monsignor Thomas.
Good evening. I want to apologize for the absence of a preamble, but we need to get to the point, I believe, right? So, Honorable Prime Minister, other cabinet ministers, the Honorable Attorney General, members of the observer missions, and other distinguished officers and invitees, good evening. My name is Violanda, and I stand before you today as the President of the National Youth Council of Dominica, deeply honored to address this important gathering. Our purpose here is not merely to discuss the idea of youth involvement in the electoral reform process, but to recognize it as an imperative for the future of our democracy. We further recognize that the Sir Dennis report is filled with many recommendations, and these consultations will seek to find a definitive common ground towards this process of electoral reform. Our nation has seen significant progress in recent years, as it is our collective responsibility to ensure that this progress continues. Our electoral system is the backbone of our democracy, and it is vital that it remains robust, transparent, and representative of all our people. In this regard, the role of young people in shaping the electoral reform process cannot be overstated. First and foremost, the youth of Dominica are not merely the future of our nation, we are its present. We contribute significantly to the socio-economic fabric of this nation, and as such, we must have a seat at the table, a seat that which we are grateful for. When discussing the future of our electoral system, this inclusion is not a matter of option, but a matter of necessity. As the President of the National Youth Council, I've witnessed the passion, energy, and creativity that our young people possess. We bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and a burning desire for a just and equitable society. When it comes to electoral reform, our engagement is an opportunity to infuse new life into our democracy, to modernize our electoral processes, and to address the unique concerns and aspirations of the youth. To ensure meaningful youth involvement in the electoral reform process, several steps must be taken. First and foremost, education and awareness. We must prioritize civic education and awareness programs targeted at young people. This will empower them with the knowledge and understanding of our electoral system, making them informed participants in the reform process. Technology integration. Young people are often early adopters of technology. Embracing modern technology, as is recommended within this report, in the electoral process can make it more accessible, efficient, and transparent. Involving young tech-savvy individuals in this aspect of reform is therefore crucial. Youth candidate participation. It would be remiss of me not to mention that encouraging and supporting young people to run for political office is another vital step. By doing so, we diversify our political landscape and ensure that the voices of the youth are represented at all levels of government. Civility and respect. In all our endeavors related to electoral reform, we must maintain a culture of civility and respect for differing opinions. This sets an example for future generations and fosters a healthy political environment. As we discuss the crucial topic of youth involvement in the electoral process, reform process that is, it is essential to recognize that the modernization of our electoral system must go hand in hand with the incorporation of the concept of e-governance. The convergence of these two aspects is not just a matter of convenience, but a necessity for the evolution of our democracy in the digital age. Our nation, like the rest of the world, has witnessed a rapid advancement in technology. The advent of e-governance has the potential to revolutionize how we conduct our electoral processes, making them more accessible, efficient, and transparent. In this regard, the role of young people, who are often at the forefront of technological innovation, becomes even more critical. E-governance can have a significant positive impact on electoral reform activities in Dominica in several ways. I shall list them. Increased transparency. E-governance can provide platforms for real-time reporting of election-related activities, including voter registration, candidate nominations, and the polling station data. This transparency can enhance trust in the electoral process. Improved voter registration. Electronic voter registration systems can streamline the process, reducing errors and ensuring accurate voter rolls. This minimizes the risk of voter fraud and enhances the integrity of our elections. Accessible information. Websites and online portals can disseminate vital election-related information such as voter guides, candidate profiles, and election laws. This empowers voters to make informed decisions. Efficient voter communication, and I think that takes care of the private radio station issue. Utilizing email, SMS, or mobile apps such as TikTok. Guys, the youth are on TikTok. Just saying to the political parties in the House. E-governance can facilitate direct communication between election authorities and voters. This can include notifications about polling locations, voting times, and important deadlines, including close of registration. Electronic voting. Implementing secure electronic voting systems can make the voting process more convenient and accessible for citizens, including those living abroad. It can also help reduce the time and resources needed for ballot counting. Data analytics. E-governance can enable the collection and analysis of election data. This can help identify irregularities or trends, allowing for proactive measures to ensure fair elections. Reduced paper usage. By digitizing many aspects of the electoral process, e-governance can reduce the reliance on paper ballots, which is not only environmentally friendly, but also reduces the likelihood of lost or mishandled ballots, and will put us right on track in becoming the first climate resilient nation. Enhanced security. Robust cybersecurity measures can be implemented to protect electoral systems from hacking and cyber threats, ensuring the integrity of the election process. Remote monitoring. E-governance tools can help remote monitoring of elections, allowing international observers and relevant authorities to assess the freeness, fairness, and the transparency of the electoral process. Feedback mechanisms. Online platforms can facilitate citizen feedback on the electoral process, enabling continuous improvement and responsiveness to voter concerns. And finally, cost efficiency. While there are initial costs associated with implementing e-governance solutions, in the long run, they can lead to cost saving through reduced paperwork, improved efficiency, and reduced risks of fraud. However, it's crucial to implement e-governance in a way that ensures security, privacy, and inclusivity. Additionally, providing adequate training and support to citizens and election officials is essential to maximize the benefits of these technologies and minimize potential drawbacks. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the involvement of young people in the electoral reform process is not just an option, it is a necessity. We are the change makers of today, and the decisions made in this process will shape our nation's tomorrow. Let us work together across generations to create an electoral system that is inclusive, transparent, and just. By doing so, we will not only strengthen our democracy, but also lay the foundation for a brighter and more prosperous Dominica for generations to come. I finally put out a call to young people. Your voice matters. It's not just a cliche, it's a crucial reality. This is your call to action. Vote with purpose. Show up on election day. Your vote is your power. Engage in dialogue. Participate in discussions about electoral reform. Empower others. Encourage your peers to vote and get involved. Stay informed. Stay updated on current events and policy changes. Informed citizens are essential for thriving democracy. And finally, advocate for change. If you see shortcomings in the electoral process, don't stay silent. Advocate for reforms that promote transparency, accessibility, and accountability. Your generation, and I say our generation, holds the key to shaping our future. We need to be the change makers, the reformers, and leaders our country needs. Get out there, be heard, and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lander. Can I please call on Yannick Regis? Can we have a mic, please?
Hello, good night to everyone. Protocol being established, my name is Yannick Regis. I am wearing the cap for a number of different sporting associations tonight. Madam Chair, I am here I'm seeking clarification pertaining. I heard a number of different suggestions by Dominica Business Forum, former Prime Minister Ellison James, regarding private media access. State access, I understand, but are we going to force business, private citizens, to provide services for business, for political parties, even if they're not inclined to? And if so, Madam Chair, are we going to extend it to truck drivers, buses, T-shirts, and other paraphernalia businesses? Are we going to force bus drivers to transport people to different rallies? Is it that route we are going down? If so, I don't think that is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yannick Regis. Just to indicate that what the proposed legislation now provides for is in relation to state media, and the suggestions are from presenters that it should also apply to private media. Thank you very much. I would like to ask and give the floor to Nathalie Murphy. Can we have the mic, please?
Thank you. First of all, let me recognize Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit, Madam Chairman, other members of government, our international observers, and other distinguished guests present at this forum. My name is Nathalie Murphy, and I am a founding member of the Dominica Association of Persons with Disabilities, which I will refer to in my presentation as the acronym DAPD. For the benefit of our international observers or guests, the Dominica Association of Persons with Disabilities was established on the 26th of October, 1983. So come this October, we will be observing our 40th anniversary. It is a national cross-disability, self-help consumer movement and is the representative voice of and for persons with disabilities in the Commonwealth of Dominica. I have to state here that our organization was extremely pleased when, in February 2021, we received official communication from Justice Dennis Byron inviting us to participate in the consultation on electoral modernization or reform, as the case may be, and we gladly accepted the invitation. Shortly thereafter, our submission was forwarded to the relevant address provided, and I have to say that the submission that DAPD made was specifically and primarily based on Article 29 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which speaks to persons with disabilities' participation in political and public life. This convention was ratified by the government of Dominica on October 1st, 2012, following a massive educational campaign that DAPD had undertaken. The government has since followed that up with the establishment of a National Commission of Persons with Disabilities with the responsibility to implement the various articles and measures contained therein. And I have to say, was appointed as chairperson of that committee, which is comprised of 13 organizations representing persons with disabilities and organizations working and have interest in disability. I want to place on record that traditionally, persons with disabilities have freely and actively participated in the electoral process in Dominica, and that they have always had the opportunity to choose or cast the vote for the candidate of their choice. However, we will be the first to admit that certain systems and measures need to be implemented to facilitate better and more, better participation in the process and to make the situation better. Yeah? So, in our submission, we use, as I said, Article 29 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And although I am blind, I know quite a bit of what is contained in that article. It speaks to access to the physical environment and public buildings, Article 9. So in our submission, we reference the fact that there are certain, or on polling day, certain polling stations are not accessible for persons with disabilities and, of course, those with other mobility impairments. We highlighted that. We also mentioned the fact that information should be made available in usable and accessible format to cater to the needs of persons who are speech and hearing impaired, those who are deaf or hard of hearing, and in a technology that can facilitate the various types of disabilities and to ensure that no one is left behind. In the case of persons who are blind and visually impaired, we are specifically concerned to the fact that in the law presently, provisions are made for you to cast your vote, provided that you take along a friend, a relative, a family member. We are in modern times, and we as blind people, that business of secret ballot is very important to us, very essential. Private, while we as blind people, we trust the people who accompany us to the polling station. But then, you never know. You never know. So we are saying that some measures should be instituted to ensure that persons who are blind and visually impaired can cast their votes secretly and privately. And you may ask me, but how is that possible? How can that be done? No, we have done our research, and we know that there exists in some countries where this has been implemented. We don't have to go very far. And in preparation for this presentation, I made some inquiries, and I discovered that in Trinidad, persons who are blind and visually impaired use a system where they are able to cast their votes privately and independently. So we are suggesting and asking that consideration be given in any legislation to ensure that persons who are blind and visually really cast their vote privately and independently. We also look at the, since I don't have a written script, I have to depend on memory. Sorry? Oh, transportation. We also suggested that some form of state introduced mechanism should be introduced to assist with the transportation of persons who are wanting to vote, to take them to the polling stations to cast their vote. We are not talking about transportation, whether you live in overseas, and we would ensure that transportation managed by the state, some kind of mechanism be initiated to assist persons with disabilities wanting to go to cast their votes so that they can do that freely and independently as well. Thank God for modern technology, and the APD was again invited to be one of the recipients of the copy of the report of the Justice Dennis Byron, the hard copy. When the hard copy was presented to us, I was present, and so was my colleague. And when I looked at it, don't tell me I didn't see it, I found it was so heavy. I said, oh my goodness, how are we as blind people going to go through this huge document? But I was extremely pleased when I heard the announcement that you could go online and you could download the document, which I did the very next day. So I was able to download the document, read as much as possible of it, and search and see where exactly references are made to persons with disabilities. And I saw, and I read, and I listened, because my device, my assistive technology, my iPhone, my smartphone read to me, and I found that in the recommendation, all it said was facilities for persons with disabilities, which I found to be very vague. So that is why I took the liberty to expand on some of the areas that I previously mentioned. In terms of terminology and language, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities gives a definition of what disability means, and I will tell you. It says, anyone with a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or psychological impairment, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. You can consult the convention and you So when we speak about persons with disabilities, because in recent times we have been hearing all kinds of terms. We have heard terms about differently abled. We have been hearing, oh, a challenge, he has a challenge, he has a handicap. But the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which our government ratified and which has been internationally accepted, defines what persons with disabilities mean. And so that is what we are encouraging, that we as persons with disabilities, we describe us, because words matter, and persons with disabilities take strong offense to when they are referred to adjectives other than what is provided in the convention. So in Justice Barron's report, and I know it also exists, I think it is in the Electoral Act, it speaks of incapacitated voter. My goodness, no, we don't like it. We are recommending that these terms be abolished, removed, and it also speaks about physically challenged or physically incapacitated. So physically incapacitated, what happens to those with the sensory impairment, the intellectual period, just a voter with disability and finish with that. That will be quite acceptable to us in Dominica. So ladies and gentlemen, what we are saying as an organization is that we support. I'm not going to go through the various areas much has been said about that, and that was not our focus in terms of voter ID or confirmation and this kind. It was not our focus. Our focus was ensuring that persons with disability can actively and independently participate in the electoral process on an equal basis with others. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention, but I just want to make one comment as a person, personally. I have been listening there keenly and hearing references being made of certain things in the United States about how many terms, two-term limits. But I have listened, and I don't know if it has been said in other forms. I have not heard anybody say that when a government is removed in office, they can go with all the staff or the things should resign, and they go and appoint their own people coming in. Whatever government is coming should appoint their own staff. I have not heard that. So let us see. That is what I would like to say personally on that matter. That did not come from DAPD. I just want you all to know that did not come from. So I thank you for your attention and the opportunity to participate in this exercise. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ms. Murphy, and thank you for sharing with us a very important perspective from persons living with disabilities. We appreciate that. Can I please hear from Hezron Seraphin? Your choice. Your choice.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Good night. Protocol established. Madam Chair, I promise you I'll be very short. Okay, so I just wanted to make a few points, and I felt it necessary. Okay, on the issue of the special welcome, I should say, to the observers, I think your role is critically important, and your presence certainly is welcome. Of course, we recognize the presence of the Prime Minister and other members of Cabinet. Protocol established. Okay, on the issue of the overseas voters, I think it is important that persons living overseas have the right to vote, or retain their right to vote, I should say. Overseas voters make an important contribution to the country's development. They have been making and they continue to make an important contribution to the country's development. Every Dominican, doesn't matter where you live, whether you live locally here or you live overseas, I think every Dominican is a Dominican. And a Dominican who lives overseas is no less of a Dominican than one who lives locally. So I think every Dominican should have the right to vote, and not because somebody lives overseas, they should have less rights than people who live here. In fact, I've heard it said, many comments, or some of the comments have been said here. Some persons seem to reference, that policies here, local policies here, do not affect persons who live overseas. But I beg to differ. I will say, actually, in many instances, local policies here have even further reaching implications for persons overseas than the average ordinary person who lives here. Persons who live overseas, many of them, they have their property here, they have businesses here, they employ persons here, all their monies, all their life savings are in the banks here. Policies that the government pass can affect them just as much as they can affect any local person. And a lot of them, because of the level of the resources that they have here and the investments they have made here, government policies might even have a greater effect on them. So I think that persons who live overseas, Dominicans, ought to have the right to vote also. On the issue of the ID card, I would prefer a multi-purpose ID card. All right? I would like to have a card in my wallet that if I go to the supermarket and I present my card for payment and the cashier asks me to identify myself, that I can also use it to identify myself. I think that if I travel and I need to show some form of ID, that I should be able to use my card. I think it's a waste of resources to have a card carried around for 5 years and I can only use it once in 5 years. I think it's a total waste of resources. Besides that, if I show up at the polling station on voting day, on polling day, and for some reason I couldn't find my card, is that going to be a reason to deny me of my right to vote? All right? I do not think my right to vote should hinge on my presentation of an ID card for voting. Once I can properly establish that I am the person that I say I am, and that my name is on the register, and I am entitled to a ballot, I should be given the right to vote. So whether I present my passport, my driver's license, once I can establish that that is me, I believe that I should be given the right to vote, and my right to vote should not hinge on my presenting a voter ID card. With respect to campaign financing, Madam Chair, I don't think that the Treasury should be responsible for that. Recently, I heard a certain politician say that he actually, talking on this subject, he referenced that it shouldn't be a problem for the Treasury to give his party $10 million to campaign. I don't think that's a burden the Treasury should bear. And if it is that the decision is that the government is going to fund political parties to that level, I'm prepared to announce that I form a party. And I can tell you there are many persons who will take advantage of the situation and actually try and cash in on that 10 million. I don't think the Treasury should bear that responsibility. In any case, in an era of limited resources, I do not think the government should have to decide between funding a party and building a school in a community or fixing a feeder road somewhere. I think in an area of limited resources, that should not be an issue that the government have to consider. And in fact, I'll submit that any party that's unable to finance its campaign or unable to raise funds for its campaign may not be able to raise funds to run the country anyway. Lastly, Madam Chair, I am for the confirmation of voters and not the re-registration. I think we are in an area where technology has made the thing very simple for us. There's no need to make it complicated. If I was to make up a list, for example, for my employment, if I was to make up a list of 1,000 persons that I wish to sell insurance to, and for some reason I realize that some persons on the list, there's no prospect of selling them insurance, or I no longer have any interest in selling them insurance, there is no need for me to scrap my list. I can simply delete those persons on the list that I figure are no longer prospects for me. There's no need for me to start from scratch again. So I think it's a waste of resources, actually, to entirely scrap the list and then start the registration process from start again. To me, it's a total waste of resources. And besides, in a few years' time, if we were to do that, we'll be back to the same point. In the next few years, we're going to have dead persons on the list also. We're also going to have persons who presently are here who would have moved out and start living overseas, or would now be living overseas. Are we saying that the fact that we now have persons again on the list who live overseas, that we should scrap the list again and re-register everybody again? I think the process is a process that we can handle without having to do all of that. And it's a very simple process. The technology allows for us to simply delete persons on the list now who do not qualify. It's a waste of time and resources to re-register all of us who are here, that we can establish are here and qualify to vote. I do not see the need to remove me from the list and then tomorrow tell me come back and re-register. I think that's a total waste of my time. So, Madam Chair, I'll leave it there, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hezron Seraphin. Can I ask Maurice Cyril to please share his remarks with us?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good evening, Mr. Prime Minister, Brother AG, and all cabinet members, and to the invited guests, and all ladies and gentlemen present. My name is Maurice Cyril. I'm a journalist, more part-time than anything else. So I'll be talking for myself, and so I will talk in, that's good enough? I'll be talking for myself, basically, and as a media person. As a journalist, when I write for people to do the right thing. I've been guided by that principle all my life. More than 40 years, I write so people do the right thing. You know, so I've been following this debate about reform for years and years and years. And there's only one motive behind that, as far as I'm concerned. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 29, it says, God made us simple, but we have made ourselves complicated. And now in that complication, greed, selfishness, power, and all the things that cause problems in the world, because we have made ourselves complicated. The other thing, the will has been invented, the will. It goes wrong. And no matter what we come up with here, it cannot be reinvented. You can put mags on it, you can put spokes, you can put axle, what I put is wheels, you can put decoration on it, it's wheels, you can reinvent it. So you can put all kinds of things called the will is the will. Now, we all here talk about democracy. One vote, one man. When we go to the polls, each of us has a vote. No, when I first voted back in the 1970s, there were 5 of us, brothers and sisters, 5 of us. We all voted. In '86, a brother died. By '90, his name was off the list because the registry works naturally with the electoral office. For me, back to fuss about dead people voting, yet no, that was an issue. And next thing, in '93, a brother went away, I said, for 20-something years. And when he came back in 2019, there was a city election in Roseau. No, I have voted every election in Dominica. Each city council have elections, and one person in Roseau vote in Ward 4 is a fellow called Maurice Cyril. So he had two votes, Maurice Cyril votes. So my brothers have been town, we were walking in Roseau. We went up Constitution Hill, went Catholic, there's a new center. That's where the police station was. So my name is there, my brother's name is there. So I asked him, you voting now? He said, I don't know the people. But I said, I don't know people myself, in Dominica, I don't know them. But I looked at the four names on the vote, on the ballot paper. I went in, cast my votes. When I came out, my brother arguing with people in the hall. I told people, I'm not voting. I tell him, let's go. I was my brother. So my brother was away for 27 years, he wanted to vote. So I voted because it's the norm. Strangely, I know the people. But the people I voted for, they won the election. And that has been going on for a while. So we all grew up praising the democratic system, one vote, one man. We go in schools, we have head boy, head girl, one vote, one man. You go to the club, one vote, one man. You go to Cuba, vote to elect president, one vote, one man. No matter where you go, it's one vote, one man. And we say we love democracy, it works. So if we want to change democratic system, for what? Because some people cannot win, so we want to change it to satisfy, to hoping that they may win. No. Other 7, 8-year-olds going to school, we were taught, do not vote for yourself. And I tell you what happened years later. As a member of the Justice Movement, treasurer, second vice president, first vice president, president time term to be elected. I didn't vote for myself, and I lost by 1 vote. Yeah. And it happened to me after that again, you know, because as a youngster, you go to school, courtesy, good behavior, respect people, and things like that. And so the teacher or the priest gives you a notion, and it stays there, and you go up here to do the right thing. To do the right thing. And so, and that happened. No, I told a journalist colleague, a young man, some weeks ago, when the Prime Minister was asking for the report from Sir Byron and was taking time to come, I say, you know, I think Sir Byron looking for something to help the opposition forces. That's why he can time searching, because no matter where he looked, presidencies here, Commonwealth, OECS, Australia, everybody doing the same voting, one vote for one man. But here we tried to look for something, so he came up with things like, well, he tried to compromise for the voices that represent special groups here. Compromise. So you have for 5 years, you come down for 50 to 90 days to qualify to vote. My brother said he was away for 27 years. When he came back, his name was on the list. And he could have voted this up in Roseau, in Ward 4. And so the concern about names of the list, that never worked. Why want to change it now to prove what? It has never worked. You go away, come back, my sister was to study, she came back, and I'm on the list. I don't tell you how to. Why you want to change that? That's me. I'm talking to anybody there, you know. I bought campaign financing 30+ years ago. One of my godson's initials were MAP. I told his father, you know, we're talking politics. And you for a party, you're going to call it MAP. MAP means Man Against Progress. Or you can say Men Against Progress. And the way the world is going right now with all the LGBT and same-sex and home, things like that kind of progress we knew from early o'clock, that kind of progress, we have no truck with that, no progress. And so if the government decides to finance political parties, I can some of my friends register in a party, Men Against Progress, to get our campaign financing from the state. Okay, so I think they want to finance political parties. I am going to form my party also, get my group, and we're going to have a party, political party. Well, about dead men voting, that's been discussed, and that's a non-issue. I'll stop there getting late with one other quote. Just one other quote. It's taken from Isaiah at chapter 30, verse 10, which says, I'm talking about people who don't like to do the right thing. It says, they would say, don't talk to us about what's right. Tell us what we want to hear. Don't talk to us about what's right. Talk to us about what we want to hear. About God is telling people, because we want things, not yet the right thing, what we want to hear, what to do, we go for it, and we say, yes, that's what I want, I got it. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cyril, can we, Monsignor Thomas? And I think Severin Mackenzie and this gentleman would like the floor as well. Will you speak from your seat? His seat.
Because I'm a preacher, I thought I should come to the pulpit. Madam Chairman, Chair Lady, Prime Minister, observers, welcome to our shores and enjoy our people and the nation Isle of Dominica. Although the protocol specialists say it's not good as the protocol is established, I would like to crave indulgence. I will say, my brothers and sisters. I was late tonight because I really thought the program started at 8 o'clock. And besides, I got a sick call, and I thought the sick call was very important for me. Pastor Rodney said that he was having physical pain. I have been having emotional and psychological pain because I'm concerned about the state of affairs in my country. I'm concerned that Sir Dennis Byron was vilified, which throws bad light on our country. And this because of some mischievous people who don't love our country. It's a problem of technology. I thank the present administration for being committed to electoral reform, and I congratulate the thousands of Dominicans who are responding by participating in this process. For the many years that we have been going to the polls, general elections ran smoothly until recently a small group of people asked for electoral reform, which, though in process, is being impeded by some unpatriotic individuals who want to create mayhem in our own quiet country and are determined to destabilize and attain power by whatever means possible, not out of love for Dominica, but because they hate a particular individual who is loved here and abroad. I make no apologies for speaking the truth. I am a member of the clergy. The difference, the two here have Roman colors, I don't have one. I'm carrying the cross. I carry the cross because I suffer out of my genuine love for my people. I am a member of the clergy, but I don't represent them. I speak as a person with the welfare of my country at heart. I'm in total agreement with electoral reform. And here's some of my thoughts. Those presenting themselves for public office should be literate enough and of sound mind. Perhaps they should be asked to have a psychological evaluation. I don't believe in a virtual constituency. This is an exercise in futility. We should no longer talk of Dominican diasporans, but rather Dominicans living abroad. Regarding the right to vote, once registered in Dominica, they should be able to vote at any time. This question of 5 years should be totally abolished. The question of dead people voting makes no sense. And this matter can be solved by a proper dialogue between the village councils where the dead are registered and the electoral office. I don't think that government should finance electoral campaign. Each party should fend for itself. To my knowledge, all political parties are offered the opportunity to use the airwaves of DBS. But if certain individuals use it to discredit our nation and disrespect officials, then no place should be given to them. Finally, we should now do reform in terms of prayer. The consultation is not meant to be a confrontation, but a friendly exchange to modernize our electoral system and for personal, not for personal or political power, but in the national interest. I am priest, not to elevate myself, to love people as they are. Because the reform will only be successful through prayer. And the Prime Minister said he'll be a pastor after he leaves office, and that won't be in a hurry. Prayer is important because all, especially religious leaders, should pray more so that they may not practice and preach violence or civil disobedience, rather talk about justice, compassion, mercy, and national pride. I am not happy with people who term themselves patriots. They are haters of Dominica. Integrity, therefore, should be the norm. A major reform should consist in the respect given to all parliamentarians, and particularly to the leaders of political parties, by us, men of the cloth. Complaints are here and there that we don't always respect our politicians when it comes to church. Perhaps, hopefully, will not inflict spiritual injury or spiritual surgery on our people. May God bless us. May God bless Dominica. May God anoint this consultation. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Monsignor Thomas. Can we hear from Mr. Severin Mackenzie? And he would be followed by, I think, yourself.
Good evening to everybody, Mr. Prime Minister, members of the Cabinet. Having been one of those who engaged Sir Byron immediately after he was engaged to undertake his assignment on electoral reform, I thought it was important that I should maybe lend my voice to the discussion on electoral reform. And when we engaged Sir Byron, in fact, I was the president of the Dominica Business Forum and also the president of the Dominica Manufacturers Association. So right now, I'm only the immediate past president of both organizations. In 2019, in January 2019, I was part of the electoral reform group that spent quite a considerable amount of time reviewing the electoral legislation of Dominica and came up with a comprehensive report in 2019, which was presented to the OAS, CARICOM, and the CARICOM Secretariat. And copies were in fact made available to all political parties and circulated online. In the process, we met with all representatives of all political parties, including the Freedom Party, EWP, and the Dominica Labour Party. But before I just go into the brief remarks that I would like to make, I would just like to ask some questions with regards to the process that we are involved in right now. Will the contributions made at these consultations be given favorable consideration in the final legislation? If so, how will this be done? Is the ruling party and government the ones responsible for the preparation of the final document? Will parliamentarians be allowed to vote their conscience based on the decision taken by their respective constituencies? Is this exercise a fait accompli and all this talk just a formality? Will a broad-based committee established to prepare the final report where all ideas will contend so that we could come to some level of consensus? Do we expect the Electoral Commission and government to change the final report after the review? With these legitimate concerns, I will proceed with my presentation, trying to avoid repeating what has been said before. I trust well documented for the consideration. It is clear that this process is really putting the cart before the horse. The person sitting as the moderator of this consultation should really have been Sir Dennis Byron, because really, in our discussions with Sir Dennis Byron, he did promise consultation. And he did say that he would have a consultation where we would review his findings before it was actually submitted to the government or the Electoral Commission. So my main disappointment with Sir Byron is that he failed to comply with this basic promise that he made to convene the national consultation to review his findings prior to the submission of his final report. But I guess if this was done, we would not be going through this laborious exercise, but maybe it's a good thing he didn't, because at least we have some discussion with everybody at the table and ideas contending. With regards to the cleansing of the voters list, I believe that with the technology at our fingertips, we can get some school children who participate in the Create and Code programs to develop an app to clean the voters list within a week. Give them the electronic deaths list from the registry, the list of electors from the electoral office with the basic information and with date of birth, address, and some basic information. And these children will cleanse the voters list. With the list cleansed of dead people, the re-registration or verification, whichever we choose to call it, process can proceed. This process can be done on island. Anyone who wants to vote must register on island. By the way, some years ago, the Electoral Commission embarked on a registration process where some persons submitted their private information. What is the status of this initiative? Where is the equipment? Why was it aborted? anyone who doesn't vote for 2 consecutive elections, I believe, should be automatically deleted from the voters list. But they are free to re-register, because if you did not vote for 2 consecutive elections, it means that you are either dead, out of state that you cannot vote, or you are not interested in voting. So, I believe, and with this, the whole question of having to disqualify anybody from participating in the electoral process, and the 5-year question, because automatically I believe that anybody who votes in one election, in the subsequent election, they are qualified to vote. So which means if they do not vote in one election, they do not vote in 2 elections, that's 10 years. They are either dead, out of state, not interested. So an app can actually take care of that, but nothing prevents these persons from re-registering, because it is unfair for the country to have 74,000 people on the voters list with a population of 60,000 and 40,000 voting. We have to cleanse the list to know exactly. And what it actually gives, it gives a false impression that the voter turnout was 50%. And the voter turnout was 50% because the 74,000 persons who are on the voters list were not supposed to be there. With regards to disenfranchisement, I believe that the biggest disenfranchisement a voter can suffer or subjected to is for a politician to come, ask for his vote, ask a voter for his vote, beg him for his vote, and then when the person gives him all types of promises, and at the end, this one politician can abandon all the principles and everything that he begged for and jump to the other side. If you want to switch across the floor, I believe that candidates who win elections and want to cross should have the decency to resign and go back to the voters and get their consent. With regards to voters' registration card or national ID cards and those type of things, the reason for an identification to vote is because you want to make sure that the person who appears in a polling station to vote is the person who is actually voting. So, if every voter has a voter number, this is basically I think that is most important, that every voter registration number, which is peculiar to individual voters, whatever ID that you use, this number should be on the identification card that you use to identify you as the legitimate voter. Because if you use other IDs, there are other people with the same name. There are a number of persons with the same names. But one person with one voter ID number, we should be able to resolve this problem. So I think the whole question of voter identification cards, what is actually necessary is to make sure that the person number of the voter coincides with the person. Because I do not believe that we are going to have machines to read biometrics and all those things. So, after almost 45 years of political independence from Britain, I think this is the first opportunity that we have to look at the electoral system that we inherited from our colonial masters. It took me just 12 years after independence, in 1990, when I contested the elections for the Dominican Labour Party, to recognize that I had a total distaste for our electoral system. Yeah, because in 1990, when I contested for the Dominican Labour Party, I was contesting against Richard Roberts and Conrad Cyrus, and I was straight from a university in Cuba, where my qualifications were not recognized, and I was supposed to be a hard communist. And then I went up for the Labour Party. Those who are interested in knowing about the history of the Labour Party can check me out. Right, Mr. PM? Yeah, but there are other things in terms of campaign financing and those type of things. In 1990, under Mike Douglas, the Labour Party's budget was less than $100,000. In fact, my contribution that I received was $500. It was just the money to lose my deposit. Right? In 2000, the campaign budget for the Dominican Labour Party was just about $300,000. What I understood right now is millions. So maybe we really need to look at where we came from, where we are now, and what should be done as far as campaign financing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just wanted to share some of my thoughts.
Thank you very much. I have this gentleman here and this lady, and then the last speaker will be Mr. Maslin. Please.
Good night to all. My name is Peterson Benjamin, a servant of God, a pastor by profession. I do not want to bore you, but really say to you, where is the finger of God when it comes to nation? God has a part to play in nation building. God has a part to play in purpose and the destiny of a nation. And that sometimes is what the fleshly part of us leave out, because we do not want to, as it were, fall in alignment with God. What is God saying for Dominica? Where does God want Dominica to be at this time? What is the role of Dominica now in this present earth that we're living in? And I don't want to say much. I'm of the view, maybe, that I don't think that no Dominican, period, should be removed from any list. That's my view. Because it's against the fundamental right that you have given me as a citizen to vote. And at the same time, you are coming back with a law to infringe on that right, to tell me that if I don't return to Dominica within 2 or 3 years of that 5 years, that choice that you have given me is no longer a choice, but you have just manipulated it. I had a little time reading, and I found it strange that a voter ID card could have more life than the actual right to vote. That the recommendation on Mr. Dennis Byron, Sir Dennis Byron, is saying that he's given a recommendation to vote on an ID card for 10 years, but I have 5 years. to remain as a voter. But my card, if it is implemented, gives me 10 years. I don't know, I'm not an expert, I'm not a legal person, but I found that to be very strange. It is in the Annex 6. And I found that strange. I do recommend, and I think we should have had it years ago in this country, the campaign fund being monetized, even more now, because there are some demonic and devilish NGOs out there. I put it straight to you, I don't have time. I'm a preacher, and I will tell you the truth. There are some demonic NGOs outside there that gives us and now tells us that there is a free gender. It's no longer male and female, there's a third gender. And they are now pushing educational books. This is serious. This process that we are in is more serious than we're taking it. We are there sitting and discussing United Workers' Party, Labour Party, and we are not looking at the purpose of Dominica, the destiny of Dominica. What is Dominica's role in this season? What Dominica has to show? What do we have to give when other nations are seeking to shut us down? I'm telling you the truth. What do we have to give? What do we have to offer in this season? The time has come for our government to lean more on the church. That's the honest truth. The time has come for the government to lean more on the church. And the time has come for the church to stop behaving like little boys and little girls and behave like mature men and women to lead this country. This is not time for us to be playing. Let me say this to you up front. From Scripture, God is not democratic. God is not democratic. God does not come and ask you to give me an advice. He does not. God does not give government that thing that we call democratic rights. God gives government the power to rule and the power to guide, the power to administrate, the power to do right for the people, the power to defend the people's right. That's what God gave government power to do. And we have to get to that place. The finger of God is so much more important in the time that we live in. Let me say this to you. Please, in passing this legislation, do not tax the citizen of Dominica to fund no political party. Do not tax Dominicans. When God selected kings to rule nations, their family background played a very important role in that. The first king God chose for Israel came from a solid background. King Saul came from a solid background. There was money from his father's end that he could sit and rule. When he came to King David, he did not change the process. He also chose a solid family to rule the nation. God is not interested in what you call or what I call terms in office. God is interested in appointment, anointing, call. That's what God is interested in. And if God has called this prime minister that's sitting here, who's absent at this moment, if God has called him to rule this country at this moment, then let God's will be done. And if God has decided that in the next election, that God has decided that it is time for him to move, let God decide that. But not you and I telling God how to do his business. God has his way of selecting men and women to rule nations. And let me remind us of our history. The first man that God chose to turn around the political realm of Dominica was our first premier, Edward Libler. When he came on the scene, he gave Dominica direction where it should go. When his term came to an end, God raised another poor man in the name of deceased Patrick John. He raised him to fight and to champion the cause of independence. When that was done, God raised another poor but educated woman, Eugenia Charles. When that was done, God put her down. And God raised a man. He gave him a short tin. God raised this former prime minister sitting here, Edison James, and gave him a time in office. When God was done with him, God put him down. And he raised other men. Today, God has raised one, then let him lead. And when God is ready, let him remove him from office. I call in on us. Let's begin to bring this thing into Parliament. Stop this debate. There are some things in this document that should already be in Parliament. There should already been debate in the House. The true debate in the House. The people that we elected to vote to represent us in Parliament. Where there should be debating this thing. Right, it's okay. Where? Jesus. You see, there's a demonic thing over the country. I don't know if you understand that. Monsignor was talking about it, and sometimes we miss it out. But there's a demonic thing over this country. There is a devilish walk in this country. It is interrupting a number of things in this land. Let us stop this thing. Let us bring this thing where it's supposed to go. There are things in there that we can start the ball rolling. There are some things in there that we can start the ball rolling in the reformation process. And as we go along, fresh light, fresh eye will come in the process and will cause the process to be smooth. But the more you and I stay here and trying to get this democratic kind of thing flowing, I want to hear what you have to say and what you have to do. We will not get anywhere. I will tell you the truth. We will not go anywhere unless you take the bull by the horn like Patrick John did. He took the bull by the horn and he ran with this independence move. Unless you do this with this electoral reform, we will not get anywhere. That's the honest truth. We will not get anywhere because we will still want to hear what everybody else has to say. This is about Dominica. Good night, sirs, and good night, ma'am. But this is about Dominica. This is about Dominica. This is about the destiny of a land. This is about the destiny that a land needs to begin to find its place. It needs to begin to find its prophetic call and reason why God made her a land. You and I are here. Please forgive me. but I do have a burden for my country. I want to see this thing stop. This constant every Wednesday. I want to see it stop. That's the truth. I want to see it stop. I want to see it stop. And I want to hear a fresh voice. I want to hear a fresh need coming up in the country than this electoral reform every Wednesday. I want to hear it stop. I want to hear the answer. Yes, we have answered it. And this is the answer. Let's start the ball rolling. I don't have much to say. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, sir. Obviously very passionate. And this is the whole purpose of being here, to try to reach a resolution of a way forward. But we really have to decide whether or not we really want to see a change happen in Dominica, because we're coming up with all sorts of different wish lists. You know, every time we hear something further, we have to be realistic in what we want and what makes sense for Dominica. We seem to want to radically change everything that we have traditionally had for elections in Dominica, turn everything on its head. But we really have to sit down and decide whether we really want to have meaningful change in Dominica and what that change should look like. I would like to call on Mr. Masler, followed by Clevin Mills, and that's it. The lady has yielded her position, so Mr. Masler, followed by Mr. Mills, and that will be it for the night. Can we have the mic, please? Oh, I thought they were bringing a mic to you.
Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure being among our own people and having the discussions of the day. I want to acknowledge those who are visiting and onlooking. And I'm here tonight with a different cap. I represent Dominica Cricket Association, so that's why maybe I'm a little less cladded this evening. Representing a sporting entity or organization. And one of the main areas for us is that we realize, even in our constitution as an organization, there are certain limitations for our players. For example, players who have not participated in our Premier League, they would not be able to be for national selection. So what it does is limits individuals living abroad. If they do not come to play in our leagues, then they are not able to be selected for national. Now, if you put that vis-a-vis with the issue of residency, we as Dominica Cricket Association welcomes the voting rights for any person who meets the residency requirement. And that is something we may have to discuss, as the legislation said, 90 or 50 days, whichever we want to up to. I think Dominica Cricket Association wants to really extend the best wishes to the government on that exercise of electoral reform. Bearing in mind, the issue of sports, there's the non-alliance for any party for that purpose. And here I'm a testament of that, being the deputy leader of a political party, but still leading the national organization and trying to walk that thin line, because at the end of the day, every action, and it's not an easy task, but every action that I take have to ensure that it is surrounded around the national flag. It is not about alliance to what person or that person's political preference. We believe in the principle that no matter if you have one view and the person has a different view, all of the views should come towards the benefit of national improvement, national development, and it should stop at that. And we, as Dominica Cricket Association, wants to remain in that. My personal view on some of the issues The issue of campaign financing is very important. Make us be prone to the influence of another superpower. Or what is the cost? And then it has to come to what measures are we going to put in place, because the lack of funds in an election campaign might lead to disinterest in the elections, or even disenfranchisement of people who cannot come out. And those things have to be taken into consideration into quantifying the campaign, but it cannot be left that you could spend the entire treasury on a campaign, and one has to ask the question, what is the cost, or what is the operating expense of marking a ballot? Or what is the cost of getting someone to be convinced that you are the right person to represent me? If somebody can leave here tonight and give me at least the average cost of that, then we're really doing something in futility. We need to understand that the transactionalization of votes should not be an issue today for us. We need to understand that whatever we are doing, it will continue to add, it should continue to add to our democratic process, which means that you're voting freely and you're not voting under any form of pressure, or any other side is benefiting from an unfair advantage. And once we can do that, we would see our country blossom. So I don't want to go in all the fancy language and all the discuss. I'm just saying we are doing a right process by bringing people together to determine what is best for Dominica. I should stop at that. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Our last speaker, Mr. Mills.
Good night, everybody. Protocol has been established. I think I just need to go right into it. My name is Cleville Mills. As a matter of fact, I came here to represent the Dominica Consumer Protection Association. When we received a letter from Sir Dennis Byron, by letter dated 17th June 2021, we had a very brief recommendation to Sir Dennis Byron. At the time, we were very concerned about the question of how people influence people through false and misinformation and disinformation. You would realize that the reason why we are here, it is because we are laboring under some misinformation that an email where it was decided that the government did not want to give electoral reform. Because why? After the 2005 general elections, we know that both parties received funding, and the United Workers' Party lost the election. They challenged the election, and they went on trying to put on a smoke screen to show that they had lost the election because there was cheating. And they started that. So the strange thing is that I must say, we must look at it in the context of the history. So after that, there was a foiled attempt by the minority on the Electoral Commission to suppress the votes of electors who generated their livelihood in the diaspora. Remember, that attempt was by the Electoral Commission, unlawfully I would say, because there were two members in the minority. They took a decision to do electoral reform, total re-registration. I think that's when senior counsel said there was madness taking place in the at the Electoral Commission. So, because as a senior counsel, I don't want to really defend him, but what I understand, he realized that that process was not proper. There was no consultation. as we are having here now. And there was an attempt to pass re-registration laws. So that went on, and based on that, they took it on further to say that the government did not want to give free and fair election. But the point I want to make is, the main reason why we are here, I want to make it short because it's late already, it is already 20 past 11. The main reason why we are here is because some people want to stop Dominicans living overseas to vote. Everything else, what we talk about, bribery, treating, have to do with the fact that people can come down to Dominica to vote. So there's an attempt. Everything is about that. So what I'm saying is, let us just decide whether we want a Dominican to be able to vote in Dominica. All the other regulations, all the other things that we can put in place to ensure that that can happen, we'll do it in a way that it will not cause any, how would I say that? It will work in such a way that as a matter of fact, it is transparent. It will be transparent and we'll agree. Because it seems like, as the chairlady was saying, we'll be going back and forth, back and forth. Let us just realize the only problem that we have is whether or not we want our brothers and sisters who live overseas to vote. Other matters, all the things that we spoke about, we can take care of it. But for the purpose of that mischief, where people just make statements, you know what happened is, someone will come and make a statement without any foundation, another person will repeat it, and then it is news. Because you know nowadays our news is from the talk shows, where a person make a statement, and then the reporter come and they read it as news without getting into the gist of the information. Our advice to Dominicans and everybody in the era of fake news and misinformation, when you hear something, you must take your time and try to analyze it before you believe it. Because we have been hearing about that madness in the electoral system, in the Electoral Commission for a long time. When you now look at it, you will see that the madness was taking place. It was an effort to stop Dominicans living in the diaspora from coming to vote. So if we want to have electoral reform, let us genuinely look at what is the problem, how we can improve the system, and let us work together to bring the fine prints, the fine points. And I think we'll stop that debate and we'll be able to have a conclusion as to the things that we want in a faster way. So that's all I want to say in this late time. It is already 25 past 11.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say thank you to all the groups, associations, organizations for joining us tonight and for your frank and open discussions on the issues. This is a very important process, and we thank you for your participation. We hope that as positions are being collated or being thought of, we can identify what are the really key issues that we want to take forward that make sense for us now. There are many suggestions that are being made that would require constitutional changes. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. I would suggest that we do not approach the amendment of our Constitution lightly. There are some key things that we could take forward in our electoral legislation to address some of the issues that have been identified. So if we can probably try to focus on that so that we can actually seek to reach some level of consensus on something that makes sense for everybody for us to take forward. So I want to thank as well the ministers of government who are here with us tonight. and every night, and the observers, our stenographer, cameramen, broadcasters, and everyone who makes this consultations possible. So I wish for us to continue to have the conversation, but have it in a constructive way so that we can actually reach a point where we can bring something to the Parliament that makes sense for all Dominicans. Thank you. Have a safe journey home. We have some refreshments in the room next door, so please